I looked out of the window and all I could see were trees. They blocked the horizon completely. The wind was mostly still, but occasionally it snaked about the branches, buffeting them around, so the trees looked like sleepers, shrugging away dreams. But for now it was still. The only signs of air were the clouds following the current like whales. Trees are just like buildings, like hotels, like breathing hotels. After a while, the ache in my arm brought my attention back to the room. I'd been holding this ruler up for ages. In front of me were the apparatus we were using for the experiment. A sloping wooden plank led onto a table. The table's sides had more planks nailed onto it so that the dice wouldn't roll off, creating an open box shape. The runway had 2 nails at its top end which acted as a sort of perch for the ruler I was holding. The ruler was also wooden, as were the 2 red dice sitting on top. "Right, shall we try one?" the doctor asked pleasantly. "Okay," I replied. "Do you want me to make my prediction now?" "Yes, please." I closed my eyes and imagined myself outside in the trees. I had an axe, and I was cutting one down. It was easy, like chopping through polystyrene. When it fell, I set to cutting it into small cubes. My saw went through, easy and quick. Then I sanded the cubes and painted the dots on. When I had a large pile of dice, I set to fashioning the remaining wood into rulers. When I was done, I set the pile of rulers up by the pile of dice, and pulling a match out of my pocket, I set fire to both piles, which went up instantly, as if a switch had been flicked. I reached inside the burning mass to extract 2 slightly charred dice, which I dropped onto the grass. 8, I said, opening my eyes. A 6 and a 2. The doctor noted this down and said, "Okay, let's see then." I tipped the ruler and the dice span down the runway, bouncing as they hit the tabletop with a clack. He watched the dice intently, and as they rolled to a halt he said, 7, a 6 and a 1. He wrote this down. "Shall we try another one?" "Alright," I said, feeling sheepish. I picked up the dice and held them in my hand as I closed my eyes. I imagined myself again in the woods outside. I was standing by a small green pond encircled by trees. I walked over to the nearest tree and I bit off a twig dangling at head height. It was dry and tough, so I scooped up some pond water which I drank to help the process. When I had swallowed this mouthful, I repeated the ritual several times until I felt full. Now feeling quite ill, I sat against the tree I'd just been eating. A great wave of nausea came over me and I projectile vomited spectacularly onto the floor. Lots of green pond water was spewing out, but I could feel a difficult obstruction in my throat. After much coughing and retching, I finally brought up all the wood I had eaten. It had formed itself in my stomach into 2 cubes. I wiped the mess from my chin and looked closely at the dice. 7, I said, opening my eyes. A 4 and a 3. I tested this prediction under the doctor's observation, and again, it was wrong. Feeling quite foolish, I picked up the dice again without the doctor's prompting and held them in my hands, this time determined to get it right. I concentrated on the shape of the objects I held, felt the smooth corners, ran my fingers over the little indentations that indicated the numbers, and rolled them about so they clicked against each other. As I did this, I let my mind wander back to the woods outside. This time, I was laying flat, In a sun-dappled clearing, the leaves of the trees were swaying gently above me. I felt a weight on my legs, so I sat up to see what it was. It was a genet. The genet is a shy creature with silver fur, a ringed tail, spots and unusual markings. Being cautious not to scare this rare and magic animal, I kept very still, looking her in the eyes. Then she jumped off my legs and walked to the nearest tree, which she dug her claws into and began to climb. I grabbed a branch and climbed up after her. We ascended high into the branches until she stopped and her body became tense and rigid. She was staring hard at a green woodpecker. Her complete concentration, coupled with the minute twitches in her legs, told me she was getting ready to pounce. Then suddenly, as I had expected, she darted and leapt towards the woodpecker, seizing it. Her teeth gripped its small neck, which snapped instantly. She shook the bird from side to side violently and smacked its body against the branch to make sure it was dead. Blood spurted out everywhere and quickly soaked the woodpecker's vivid plumes and absorbed into the genet's silver fur. She took her kill and settled on a nearby branch to eat it, which she did gently, almost lovingly, as she cast an occasional glance up at me as if to apologize. I advanced to the spot where the woodpecker had been and saw a hole in the trunk that had obviously been made as a nesting spot. I reached inside the hole and pulled out an egg, now never to be hatched. With a feeling of dread and premature regret, I smashed my handful onto the branch. A stringy goo splattered from the egg and stuck to my fingers as I reached back into the hole for another one, my stomach churning. Again I smashed it and I tried to ignore the streaks of red. I repeated this process until the nest was emptied, and as I destroyed the last egg, 2 red dice fell out onto the branch, covered in translucent mucus. I took one last look at the genet and opened my eyes. 6, a 4 and a 2, I said, looking directly at the doctor. He was staring at me curiously, and only then I noticed my face was wet with tears. He gestured to the runway, and wordlessly I proceeded with the experiment. But I didn't really care about getting correct predictions anymore. I knew that everything that had happened, I had made happen. As I flipped the ruler and watched the dice tumbling and skipping down the runway, all I could think about was the genet, with blood around her mouth, coasting down her neck, and a thick pool of yolk and shell dripping from the branch uselessly. As the dice clattered to a halt, I looked out the window again. The trees were there the same as before, but I hadn't noticed the bypass. The lab was on a bridge in the middle of a road that seemed to stretch on forever, its borders flanked by colours, going on and on and on.